So what we are going to talk about today is hopefully fun, though I understand a lot of you are highly stressed out about images. But so we are going to first learn a few things, and then we are going to, they will become very important for images, but it will also make your life easier. Because a lot of you are asking lots of questions about some of these, and I guarantee you, you will like this stuff. Okay, so one of the things that we were doing last time, we were writing if statements. Okay, so the idea was that you have if condition, okay. So we had this kind of statements where you had a condition, and your condition could be anything that returns true and false. In fact, Boolean is a data type, so true and false is something you can even store in a variable. And something actually kind of you're going to have to learn to deal with. For example, you can say finished is time is equal to 3:20 p.m. I know I keep writing this. Okay, so is finished, and then I guess I have to define what time is. 2:20 p.m. What is the value of finished? It is false, right? So I can write something like if finished so it's something you have to get used to, that you can have a condition in the if statement, and then you can check whether that condition returns true or false, or you can have a variable that has a value true or false. In this case, if finished, so what is it going to print? What's it going to print? So, right? Because finished is false, so it's actually going to print whatever is in the else. Okay? So one of the things that we will learn, and it's not super important right now, is that you can have conditions that are more complex. Instead of having a single condition that returns true or false, you can have conditions that return that are over multiple conditions. So there is something called Boolean Algebra that tells you how to execute these conditions. Just for the sake of argument, I am going to write a function that prints the end table. So if you have two conditions, so something like C1 and C2, so something, for example, print 1 is greater than 2 and 3 is greater than 2. So if the whole condition returns true or false, that's when you're going to decide if the whole statement is true or false. So we are going to learn that, of course, whenever you have two conditions that are true or false, for the AND condition to return true, they have to be both true. So, for example, true and true is true, but everything else is actually false. So false and true is false. Okay, so if you have two conditions, for the AND condition to return true, they must both be true. So, for example, if today is Thursday and the time is 12 p.m., then homework should be over, right? Other conditions is not true. So if I were to call a function like this, does this return anything? No. So as a result, I need to call it like this, right? So I can do actually like this. Okay. Whereas if you have multiple conditions but connected with an OR, so whenever you have an OR condition, it will always be true unless both of the conditions are false. There's a reason why I'm writing all of these, but it'll become obvious in a second. Okay. And in fact, just to make sure that this looks nice, I'm going to put some new lines here. Okay, something like this. So if I wanted to actually print this table, right, so I have to actually print return or table, okay? Or you can actually do it like this. You can actually take the string, and then you can return whatever that string is, right? So you see the two different ways that you can write a function and call it. And by the way, if you wanted to actually have a new line without anything, you can just say print. You don't have to print new line or anything like that. Okay? So this is how you call a function that returns nothing. And this is a function that returns something. Okay. So, incidentally, is this true or false? 1 is greater than 2 and 3 is greater than 2. False is so boring. Okay, so this is true, whereas this is false. Both of them should be true. Now, OR is more tricky because in English, when you use OR, you actually consider a slightly different statement. When you say, and there are really boring, what is the word, jokes, so-called jokes about this kind of thing. So whenever in English you say, I will either have eggs or bagel, okay, does that mean you will have, you are okay with both of them? No, right? So eggs or bagel or eggs or muffin, right? It just means either this one or that one. So in logic, that would not be an OR. That would be what we call an XOR, right? In logic, an OR is either eggs or muffin or both of them, which is why so bad, right? So so this is why we have, you know, either one of them is true or both of them is true. So that you have to be aware that's different than English. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of these, and I'm going to save this in a folder that we will get back to it later. Okay, so I'm going to call this truth table.py. So I have basically a file that has two functions in it, right? One is called print. One is called print and table. The other one is called return or table. And my program has nothing else, right? So if I were to hit execute, what would this do? It does nothing because I have functions, but I don't call them, right? So this program prints Boolean Algebra tables. Okay. And I'm not going to call it a program, I'm going to call it a module. Okay. Now the interesting thing is that, remember that we have been learning about modules. What was the one module we've learned? Math, right? So what a module is basically a Python program that has possibly variable definitions as well as function definitions. So you can actually write description of functions as well if you want. So what I can do, though, is I can actually write a program that imports this as if it was another module. So let's see if I can actually do it here. Import truth table, and I'm going to call it TT. Okay? This is something new that we didn't know. So I wrote these two functions, and now I actually have this whole program imported as a module. So when I import TT, what do I import? The functions that are actually in TT. Do you want to see what they are? Okay. Well, you see, I keep telling you to write these the string in the very top. That actually goes to right here. Okay. So whatever you write in the top, it actually prints it when you write help. And in fact, whatever commands you write in the top of a function, it just prints it right here. In fact, if I did help tt.print and table, okay. Okay. So it will, I did this wrong, like this. It will tell me that this is actually a function, and this is what it does, because that's the command that I put on the first line. So Python treats those separately. And now I can actually call these functions. So I can actually call these functions in the same way I can in a program. This is actually called return. Okay. So what a module is actually a Python program that has functions and variables, and you can actually use it in another program in the same way we have been doing with math. Let's write a simple program to do that. So let me write another one. So I'm going to write this to test the truth table program. As boring as it is, this is going to be interesting. So I'm going to import truth table as TT. Now remember that since I want to do this, this is actually not going to work if I just execute this. Okay? It says there is no such module, because it is trying to find a module that in a very specific place that we did not put our module there. So to make sure that that actually happens, I'm going to save this function, save this program in the same place as truth table. So I'm going to save it as test TT. Okay. So now it doesn't give an error. So I can do tt.print or table. And I can also call this as return. This is why you should give simple and easy to remember names. Print and table. So not only that we have been using modules, but you have actually also been writing modules all the time. But in addition, instead of this extremely lame module, we are going to learn a much cooler and much more fun module called the image module. Okay? So that's what we want to do today, is to talk about the image module. If you are using the book has a different module, but we are going to use one called pill or pillow, and this is what you have installed in Lab 0, so you should already have this. And we are going to do a bunch of things. But before we start, we need to learn one simple thing. And I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but it's going to make your lives very simple. So we are going to learn a new data type called tuple. And I'm going to guess that a bunch of you, a big number of you, have actually already created tuples by accident. Yeah? Did you ever see the word tuple? Okay. Anytime in your program you put a comma where you shouldn't have, it's going to create a tuple data type. Okay. Tuple data types are almost like strings. They are very, very simple. Okay. So the idea is that tuples allow you to put a bunch of values in a single variable. So instead of giving x a value like 1 or y a value like cat, you can give a value that has multiple components. So you can have multiple animals, dog. Any ideas? Banana. Sure. Great. Yes. What else? Jellyfish. That's okay.
Sloth.
Oh, sloth are awesome. I love sloth. All right. All right. So z itself is a single variable, but the nice thing about z is that it actually is possible to get individual pieces of information from z. So z itself has 4 values, and you can index what is in z by the indices. The only thing is that the indices start in 0. This is true for every programming language with the exception of MATLAB. If you are an engineer and you're doing MATLAB, you're going to be very confused. But I can access what is at Z0, which is going to be dog. Z1 is going to be banana. Z2 is going to be jellyfish. Z3 is going to be sloth, coolest animal in the world. Z4 is going to be no such thing, right? It goes from 0, 1, 2, and 3. Now, if you have seen other programming languages, your first instinct would be to say, let me change what is at Z0 to something. You cannot do that. That is not a tuple, okay? So Z0, you cannot change the value to be another wonderful animal. There was no animal mentioned. What? Tomato. All right, I'll go with tomato. The well-known animal of tomato. All right, so the tomato does not really work, but not because it's tomato. It's just like you cannot change the values. It's like the same thing you did with everything else. You can take all the values and you can assign it to a variable. And if you want to change one value, then assign it to a new tuple with that value changed. You cannot just change individual values. So the thing is that even if I did not put these parentheses, it will by default assume that it actually is a tuple, right? So any place where you put a comma where you were not supposed to, it probably created one. In fact, if you did this, it actually thinks that it is a tuple with one value, right? So this is where, you know, by accident, you probably were creating tuples. Okay, why do we care about tuples? Tuples are good because tuples allow you to pack and unpack values. So for example, if I have x is equal 1 and 2, I can unpack those values to 2 new variables. Let's call this point. Okay. So point has x and y. I can unpack those values to 2 variables because there are 2 values here. I can pack them to 2 variables. So x is 1, y is 2. Why is that so good? Well, because you were all kind of annoyed that you had to write one function for bunny population, one function for foxes, right? Why can't you return two things? Now you can. Okay, so return two things. Here you go. I am going to return A and 2. Okay, so if I do this and print X, what will I get? So X is going to be what data type? It's a tuple of two values. All right, that's great. If I wanted to actually take these two things, which is name and count, let's say, you can use whatever you want. Okay. Now actually you can return two things and assign it to two values. You can do all sorts of wonderful things. For example, let's say you want to write a function to swap two values. What it will do is it will first assign it to some dummy variable like C, and then B is going to be, no, A is going to be, no, B is going to be, why can't I do this? A and B is going to be C. Did I do this right? Yes, right? Okay, then I'm going to return A and B. Is this correct? Let's hope. Okay, so I'm going to assign A to 4 and B to 3. So I'm going to print A and B. Okay. Here's an interesting way to use the same thing, right? So take A and B, swap them, print again. Assuming that I did this correctly. Okay. You see how I write functions before any other code? Anything that comes before this point is a function. Okay. So this is kind of the main purpose of the tuple data type. Don't try to use it for other things. We will learn that right after the exam. Okay, so with that, let's talk about images. Okay, so are you with me now? Okay, now can I have quiet for a second? Okay, it's a lot of, okay. So images are a data type like any other we have seen. You have strings, Boolean, integer, lists, except that images are very, very complex. So generally, you don't really look inside an image, what the value is. You generally use functions to operate on images. Okay? So depending on what module you use, the implementation of the image data type is a little different. The one we use is called Pillow. And we use it in the same way regardless of which operating system it is. And it basically has a bunch of functions, and they do very simple things. But eventually you will understand that it's actually quite easy to use. Okay? So just remember that an image itself, okay, has coordinates. So an image is a two-dimensional object. So it goes from 0, 0 to whatever the width and the length is. So every piece of information in the image is a pixel. Each pixel has a coordinate, okay? And strangely enough, the coordinate starts at the top left corner. This is something you have to get used to. It is just the way it is. So 0, 0 is the top left corner. And the last one is generally the width -1 and height -1, because everything is 0 indexed. But in this class, we are not going to, in this lecture, we are not going to care about the end. but the beginning is at 0, 0. It's important that you understand it's the top left corner. So images can be color, images can be grayscale. It just means that each pixel is either stored as a single value, if it's grayscale, and it is stored as 3 values, a tuple of 3 values, if it is red, green, blue, RGB, right? So basically, each pixel has a value that is a tuple, and generally different RGB values have different colors. So how many of you have like played with the colors in HTML and so on? So you've kind of seen it? If not, again, it's not important, but you can see it's generally called RGB. Each color, each different RGB value gives you a different color. And the numbers go from 0 to 256. Again, it's not very important for what we are doing today, but remember, it's a tuple, so 3 things inside a parentheses. Okay? So generally, any value that is gray, white, or black, RGB are the same values. If they are different values, you get colors that are other than gray, colors we like. There are many different image modules that all of these should have been installed, but the only one we really care is the one called image. So image is the name of the module as well as the data type. Okay? So we are going to see a bunch of image methods. And I actually provided you with some images in the Piazza on the resources if you want to play along with me. So the first thing you would like to do is to read an image by loading the image. Okay? So you do that by open. So let's try this slowly. Now, this is very important that for this to work, you actually have to save your program in the same folder as the images. Otherwise, it's not going to know where to look for images. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save this in the same folder as my images. Okay. So when this is in the same folder, this is also in the same folder. So whatever I do here now is going to work as well. So the first thing we do is we import the module that operates on images. So, so you can, I think, just call image. Let's see if that works. Okay, if that doesn't work for you, I think that yours is a little different. You can try this. Okay. Do these work? You can either just import image, or you can import the image part of the pillow, which is the set of modules that have everything. So I am going to open an image, and let's try this. And I'm going to assign it to a variable. Okay. Let's make sure that I actually have such an image, right? Pizza rat. Do you all know the pizza rat? Oh, it's for older people then. All right. So let's look at this, okay? So this calls from the image module the open function. You have to give it the name of a file, and it will return you a new object, IAM. So IAM is of type image, okay? In fact, you can try the same thing here, just so that I can show you. Okay. So if you actually look at the value of IM, it will tell you that it is a JPEG image with all of these properties. But it cannot do anything because it's a complex object that has lots of different things. One thing that you can do is you can show it. So it does work. So this is a rat that was seen to have carried that was carrying a huge pizza slice, and this is apparently everybody's talking about this cat, this rat. There's a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles joke, but I guess you guys are too old for that. I actually saw that movie, not the new one, but the old one, in movie theaters. Or, I guess one called Swarm One. Okay. How do you like that? Okay. So you load an image. For an image object, one of the things your program can do is you can actually show that image. But we can actually do other more interesting things. Okay. So one of the things we can do is we can look at the properties of the image. Not as interesting, but it's okay. So you can print the size of an image. You can print the mode on image, and what was the other one? Format. Okay. So let's print these so we can see what we are doing here. Okay. You see how whatever you print comes in here, whereas whenever you show, it's a separate thing. So the size is 600 by 800, which is of data type tuple. The mode is RGB, just means that it is color. And the format is the format that it is encoded in. Most often that is JPEG, but it can be other things. So I've only worked with JPEGs, but generally it works regardless. So for example, here's another one. This one happens to be a grayscale image, so the format is actually L. Okay, so L just means that it is grayscale. It's very scary stuff. So this is apparently was one of RPI's mascots. Believe it or not. Okay. Okay. So let's do something slightly more interesting. One thing you can do is you can take an image and you can crop a box from it. So you have to give the dimensions of the box by giving the top left corner and the bottom right corner, the width and the height. So let's try this. Now, the same way we were doing any other function, the crop function crops a part of the image and returns you a new image. So I'm going to store that in a variable IM2, right? So let's actually put these in here. Okay. So if I were to show my original image, the original image hasn't changed because the crop will basically just crop a little piece and then put it elsewhere. But how about IM2, which is actually a part of this? So it's from here, right? So let's look at what happened, right? So you have 100, 100 here, and 300 and 400 here, right? So it basically created a cropping like this, right? And not only that, it created a totally new image for you. So if you wanted to save this new image, let's say in somewhere, you can write imdo.save, and then you have to give it a name, right? So it's going to save you in the same, it's going to save it in the same place that this is operating on. So it's actually not here. Oh, here it is. Okay, there it is. Okay. Okay. So whenever it shows you the image, it's actually not stored anywhere until you actually save it. Yes? I'm sorry? So they give you the dimensions of where you're cropping. So remember this. Okay, let's try to write this down here. Okay, so we have this image here, right? So this is 0, 0. For the image that we were just playing, what were the dimensions? So let's try im.size. So this was 600 by 800, right? So if you want to crop from this, you have to give the dimensions of where the box is. So let's say I wanted to take this and divide it into 4. So I'm going to have one box here, one box here. So let's write down the dimensions of these boxes, right? So what are the coordinates? So this box starts at 0, 0, this corner, right? What is this point dimension? What is this point here?
300,
300 and 400, right? So this one goes up to 300 and 400. This one starts at this one starts at this corner, which is for x is 300 and for y is 0, right? Because this is y. And then it goes up to here, which is 600 for x plus 400 for y, right? How about this one? So this one starts here, which is 300 by 0, and goes down to here, which is,
Wait, I think you did that wrong.
yeah, this is
0.
x. X is 300. So that, oh no, I did that. All right, 0 by
400.
400. We are going to see this very soon if it's right, because we are going to take these 4 and then scramble them. And then this is, so now this is x is 300 and y is 800, right?
No, it's 400.
No, this corner here.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah? And then this corner finally is 300 by 400, 600 by 800. That's the only one that's really easy. Okay. So we can actually do this. Let's crop 4 images that has this. So I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So I'm going to crop 4 separate images, and I'm going to call them like this. So you can do this. 300 by 400. This one is, so I'm going up 300 by 0. And 600 by 400. So this is 0 by 400 to 300 by 800. And this is 300 by 400 to 600 by 800. Okay? Okay, so we can see if we are right. Does it appear right? I think so, right? Okay. Okay, so what if I want to actually take these 4 and then scramble them and put them in a new image? So what I'm going to do is I am now going to create a new image that is blank. Okay, so so to do that, you can actually create this. You can create a new image with a given dimensions and a given mode. So what I can do here I want to create an RGB image that is 600 by 800. And I believe you can also define that it is a white image. Okay. So, and the nice thing is that you can actually test them here. All right. So it looks the same size, right? Okay. So what I want to do is actually take these 4 images, but then I want to paste it into them. This is going to be a little different than what we were doing before, because in the past, we always had a function, and the function returned something new. Okay? So this is the first time we have a function that is going to change something. So this is very, very important. And this is going to be very challenging after the exam. We are going to see many examples of this. But this is the only one we will see so far. So far, anytime you write a function, for example, x is ABC, right? And then you basically do x plus b to f. This returns what? This returns a, b, c, d, e, f. So it's a function that takes 2 strings and then returns a new string. Does it change the value of x? No. If you were to look at x is still ABC. And this is true for every single function that we have seen. Anytime the function did change variables, it didn't really change the original variables. Okay? It returned to something new. And the same thing is true for all of the functions we have done so far. Something like image new returns you a new image. Image crop, where's the crop? Image crop returns you a new image, but doesn't change the original image, right? So we can actually remember this because I have cropped image like this, but the original image has not changed. Okay. But there are functions that will actually change the image that it operates on, and that's only possible because image is a complex data type. It's what we call a container. Okay? And this is going to be challenging because we have to remember which function is like that. And the first function that we are going to see is paste. Okay? So the paste takes an image and operates on that image, IM, takes another image, let's say IM1, and changes this one, right? So IM is changed, but IM1 is not changed. So anytime you are pasting, you have to tell it where you are pasting. So you have to tell the coordinates of where you are pasting. So let's go back to this because this is going to be again outside. Okay. So, and I created image 1, image 2, image 3, and image 4. Now I want to paste these in a new image, but I want to scramble them. So where do you want these to go? What do you want this to be? So I can do image 3, image 1, image 2, and 4. So I'm going to paste them in random order. Okay. So let's again start slowly. So I am going to take image new, and I'm going to paste the first image. In this case, I chose it to be image 3. And I'm going to paste it at 0, 0. Okay. So if you want to see what that looks like, this is what it looks like, right? It's a 1/4 size image. I pasted it in this corner. So now I'm going to paste it right here. So I'm going to write this coordinate. So image new is changed, but image 3 is not changed, right? So take the value, paste it into image new. This image is changed, but this one is not. And image 1, I'm going to paste at 300 and 0. Then I'm going to paste it at 0, 400. Yep. That's a very good question. So this looks like it's going to be 1 pixel too wide, right?
What?
You're saying that this, when I'm pasting, is going to be 1 pixel too wide because it goes.
I'm saying that I can't use the image import at all because for some reason there's no photo stored in that function.
I don't think so. I think this should work.
I think it just has to install the IL.
Oh, so if it's not installed, then lab 0 was not completed properly for you. Okay, so if you're getting an error with this, you must go through lab 0 again to make sure that it's installed properly, if you're getting an error. Okay? So if any of you are getting errors when you're trying to test any of this with me, how many of you are getting errors? I see 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So what you need to do is go through lab 0, make sure that you installation instructions are correct. There's actually a test module that comes with lab 0. If that ran correctly, then that should work. Let me finish this and then we'll get to that. Let me finish this for a second. Okay. All right. So the challenge of what we are doing here is that whenever you are pasting an image, then you are changing this variable, and I'm not assigning the value returned to something else because this function actually changes that value. So you don't have an equality. So if you were to write something like this, okay, what would happen? This is a very common mistake that we do. Suddenly, what I want is take the value returned by imageNew.paste and assign it to a variable. What would that be? What value does this function return? Does it return something? It does not return something. You can actually try it. So let's try. Okay. And I'm going to print what this function returns. What does it return? Nothing, right? In the same way we had a function that returned nothing, this function actually does return nothing. So if I were to do this, what is going to be the value of imageNew? So I've executed the function. So there are two parts to this line, right? So first it says execute this function. Execute the function. So when you execute the function, it changes imageNew, right? Then take whatever the function returns and assign to imageNew, which will be then what? You have an answer?
No.
Okay.
I was just wondering what the text is between paste and save.
What do you say?
Paste and save, what's the difference?
Paste is manipulating an image object that we have as a variable, right? Save is saving it into a file, right?
What?
Save is saving inside a file in your file system.
The other one. Save is obvious, but paste, please.
Okay, let's get that for a second. Let me try to finish this part. Okay. Did anybody actually follow what I'm trying to accomplish here? All right. So what's going to happen here? because I don't want to assign something because it returns nothing. Okay? So this is the only way to call this. Okay? Now let me answer your questions. Okay? So let's see what we have learned, and then I will stop right here. Okay? So we have learned that there are different functions for images. So what are these functions? So we have learned that you can read a file into an image object in the program by image open. This is the name of an image file. And that will return you a variable with data type image. You can operate on a data type image object, let's say I am, and you can, for example, crop it. And what that does is it actually returns you a new variable, new value that is an image object that you can store in another variable. All of this is still inside your program. When your program ends, you've lost all these variables, right? So whatever images you've created in your program, they are not actually saved until you save it to the data type. If you wanted to actually paste something into an image, you can do image2.paste, where you have to specify another image and a location. It will change this variable, but again, it's all in your program. When your program ends, you've lost this. If you wanted to actually save it so that you can use it later, in that case, you basically write save, which is a variable, and then you write it to some file. You can describe whatever it is. If the last thing we wanted to do in our program, make sure that this new scrambled image is not lost, is I can actually now save it. Instead of showing it, I am going to save it to a new file, and I'm going to call it scrambled swarm. And you have to specify what the extension is. If you don't say JPG, it's not going to be a JPEG file. And now when my program ends, the image that I create is not going to be lost. It's actually going to be saved as a file. So my program actually doesn't show anything because it has no show. But in fact, it has now created a new file called scrambled.swarm, which is the image that I have been creating all this time. Okay? So whatever you do in your program generally is lost when your program ends, right? Any variables, you may output something, but that's it. It doesn't actually create a new value. But when you do save, you actually end up saving it into a file. Okay? So this is all that you need to do to be able to do the lab. And the lab should be fun. And there's a few if statements, but for the most part, it's a very simple lab. So I want you to have fun with it. But in the meantime, good luck with your homework and have fun studying for the exam.